signs that your relationship could be heading to a separation. So has the spark faded in your relationship? Are you drifting apart? What they look out for? What can indicate that there's a lack of connection in the relationship? And just exploring this notion of, is it normal? Is it to be expected that the spark will fade in your relationship? So what is normal to what is normal to expect, and what can be worked on, and what ultimately can't? So I remember reading this recently, and it was an interesting statistic, and what it stated was that 80% of divorce is due to people drifting apart and not feeling loved or appreciated. And this was from the California Divorce Mediation Project. And what I've noticed anyway, and I've seen this before with the Gottman Institute, there's certain things, certain pillars that will be present in a functioning, healthy, long-term relationship. And one of the things that's often most overlooked is the connection, is the sense of closeness, is the sense of friendship between the two people. And sometimes people get really kind of twisted when they talk about friendship, because then they start to maybe unconsciously relate this to, well, we feel like friends or we feel like roommates. It's not the same. That's not what I mean. Like a deep bond of friendship is very different to feeling like friends. Because especially when you start looking at it through the lens of attraction and intimacy and closeness and stuff, then it takes on a different kind of meaning. But a core of friendship, like, do you enjoy spending time together? Can you be yourself around them? Can you open up? Can you share your day with them? Is there enthusiasm, effort, interest? Is there a core of friendship between the two of you? So this is interesting when we talk about one of the predictors for relationships ending and separation, and also what actually leads to intimacy declining, and closeness and connections a big part of it. And I think if you were to ask random people, what would they believe is the biggest reason for relationships ending, especially now in this modern era where we've got social media and all these kind of dating apps, I'm sure the first thing that many people would talk about is a change in morals, a change in values. Cheating would probably be the first thing that most people would indicate as the cause of a relationship breaking down. However, I believe connection is a big factor, and I believe that some long-term relationships die many, many deaths slowly over a period of time. So back to what I was saying there about the core of friendship. Do you enjoy spending time together? Do you show interest in each other? Can you show your full self? Is it safe for you to be vulnerable? Do you feel appreciated? Do you feel like there's affection between you? Do you feel like there's an actual bond between the two of you? Is there positive regard for one another? Are you appreciative and grateful to have each other in each other's lives? Or do you communicate these to each other? When you're looking at the sum of your interactions throughout a day, is for the most part, are they more positive than negative? And that can be one of the indicators of how am I experiencing the relationship. For the most part, when we interact, is the bulk of interactions positive? So your relationship could be headed towards a separation if the connection between the two of you isn't fostered and nurtured intentionally. Now, that's slightly different, from that other topic that we were talking about the spark fading, but I'll come back to that because that is connected under this notion of drifting apart. So I remember reading this before, one of the questions that comes up for couples, especially when they feel disconnected from each other, is this idea of, are you there for me? And there's an acronym or a mnemonic, I can't remember which it is. Are you there for me? So is the person accessible? Are they responsive? And are they engaging? So unpacking this, I'm just going to think out loud, not really ramble, but I'm going to just state what I've written down here. So are you there for me when I need you? Can I rely on you? Are you there physically and emotionally? Are you present when you're with me? And that's such a big one. Like, do you have to vie or fight for your attention? Are you connected to a device? Are you constantly juggling work calls? Is there always this queue of people that are in front of me in this dynamic? Are you attuned to me? Are you aware of my emotions? Are you able to hold that space for me? Are you aware of what's going on within the relationship, my experience of the relationship, how you're showing up in the relationship? Do you even care? Big question. Do you show attention towards me and my experience? So this is a really big one, especially when we talk about sharing our day. Just something as simple and a daily ritual as sharing your day. Do you greet each other when you come on the door? Do you kiss each other in the morning, say good morning? Do you say that you love each other throughout the day? Do you have little bonds of affection and rituals that you show throughout the day? And even that thing about do you have the person's attention? Like, it's not always what's being shared. It's what they would call a bid for connection. That practice of this happened at work today, or, I had this conversation with so and so. And it's not that that is a very significant or meaningful thing. And in some cases it is, but for the most part, it's like I'm trying to share my inner experience with you. I'm trying to share a part of my world with you because you matter to me and this is meaningful and I want to connect with you on this at this point in time. So can you be there for me? Can you be there to support me when things are going on, to help me through things emotionally? Can you help me soothe? So this is this thing about co-regulation, self-regulation. Can you help me get grounded? Can you help me problem solve? And that's not to say your partner has to juggle all these hats all the time, but for the most part over the duration of the relationship, are you there for me? Can I share what's coming up for me? This is such an underrated thing. Can you show me that you're curious about my inner experience and that you want to understand what's coming up for me? So this is a big thing for connection, like trying to share something with your partner, trying to open up with your partner, even if it's not rooted in vulnerability, but just having their presence, having their attention, having their focus, having their time, their energy, and them showing that there's a willingness for them to connect. And that leads on to the next part. Are you responsive to me? Do you notice my bids for connection? Can I come to you and share my day? Can you be with me when I want to share the daily small things? And can we do this often? Whew, can't get my breath. Do you show me that what I want to talk about with you is worthwhile? So that's that thing about validating and showing presence and, sometimes even showing empathy when they're sharing things that are difficult. And I think that's really important. Where am I? That the things I'm sharing are worth acknowledging, that I matter to you and that this relationship matters to you. Is there a core of being there for each other, wanting to spend time together, not feeling forced on it, that we can grow together, share experiences together? This is such a big one, that we haven't drifted and they live in parallel lives. That notion of space hasn't got to the point where it feels like we're living in two different directions. I'm about doing my day-to-day thing, you're about doing your day-to-day thing, but we haven't got that connection between us anymore. It feels like we're in two different directions. Can you help shoulder the load of responsibility in the relationship so that I don't feel like I have to do it all alone? That you will support me as an equal in this relationship. That is such a fucking big one, especially when we talk about like ways of contribution in the relationship. So it could be emotional support, financial support, it could be helping out with chores, it could be helping out with household responsibilities, it could be so many different things. But is there a willingness to shoulder part of the load so that it's not all put on one person to bear that responsibility alone? And then engaging, the last part of that, are you there for me? Are you emotionally present? Do I have to fight for your time to get a sliver of connection? Do you respond to me? Can you show enthusiasm and effort to be present towards me in the relationship? Can you show me empathy, respect, and understanding? Are you willing to hear me and validate my experience? And can you do this even when we might feel differently about something? So like validating somebody's experience is not the same as totally agreeing with them. And I think some people get this twisted. I can validate where somebody's coming from and fully relate to what they're experiencing. But that doesn't mean we're going to see eye to eye all the time on certain things. We might actually actively disagree. But is there a core of respect between the two of you? And that is something that has to be kept sacred within the relationship. So I'm going to look at some things now that can give food for thought around signs that the relationship is heading in a bad direction, or it's maybe heading towards disconnection or potential separation. So one major indicator that things aren't in a good place could be that the person is consistently disconnecting and ignoring shows intention in my eyes. Ignoring any attempts to share or connect with them. So this looks like they're totally disinterested in you. They are disinterested in what you want to share. They don't really care about spending time with you, prioritizing the quality of the connection or the relationship between you both. And this can be called turning away from the partner, not actually nurturing the connection, not acknowledging the other person's bid for connection, and the other partner consistently feeling left alone and shut out and shut down, often with their feelings, thoughts, and emotions. So that's a big one. It's a horrible place to be. It can cause massive loneliness, pain, hurt, rejection within an actual container of a relationship. So another big sign, the person is showing you consistently over a prolonged period of time that they are not emotionally available. They're not connected to themselves. They're not aware of their own emotional experience. They might be actively numbing themselves to what's going on, distracting themselves. They're not present enough to be able to hold space. They don't know how to regulate their own emotions. They're not there to help you regulate yours. They're not willing to do that. They're not there to support you through things. They might actively let you down, and they're not attuned to you, your needs, or your feelings at all. So it's another big thing to look out for. Some of these might parallel or overlap a little bit, but I'm doing my best to make this as concise as I can and as detailed as I can, I suppose, at the same time. A constant feeling of loneliness, feeling like you're living separate lives more and more, a lack of closeness between you, so it's but obvious, a lack of interest in each other, and this can also show up in partners making decisions solely for the self, with little to no regard of the impact on the other partner. So it's especially when that always, I can't get my words out, this is more noticeable when that wasn't the norm. So when they did show you a degree of respect, a degree of courtesy, they did factor in the decision making, and now it's went from one extreme to the other. They're just totally disconnected, disinterested. They don't really give any regard for the impact, and they're just making decisions just solely based on what they think and what they need and what they want going forward. And at the underpinning that is a lack of respect towards one another, or from them towards the partner. One of the things to be aware of for yourself and your own experiences, your own emotional experience of the relationship. So little joy, happiness, less moments of affection between the two of you, maybe even less humour. If that was something that was there before as a bond, there might be significantly less humour shared between you. A growing number, and I mentioned this earlier, a growing number of negative interactions to positive. So the negative frequency of interactions is outweighing the positive ones over time. And this can also lead to feeling taken for granted, and that leads to massive resentment and frustration. And that comes back to what I was saying there earlier about feeling like you have to shoulder the load. Now, that could be with childcare, it could be with loads of different things, and it'll show up differently in different relationships. But feeling taken for granted, it's a horrible, horrible feeling, especially when the person is showing you, maybe through their communication or their behaviour, that they don't actually care, and that you should just get on with it. Lack of fulfillment in the relationships, this is a big one. Obviously, where there's less connection and less closeness and intimacy, there's going to be a lack of fulfillment. But some people consciously will settle for this because it's the lesser of two evils. They might be afraid to be on their own. They might be afraid to start again. They might be afraid to leave. There might be a load of different factors containing them and keeping them in that. Or they might have some very vague, unrealistic or disempowering assumptions about what relationships should be. Now, a lack of fulfillment in a relationship, there's maybe certain things that can be built on, but if your experience is really underwhelming, it goes without saying. But if this is the norm, it's also very likely that your sex life is also affected as well. That's one of the big questions that some really good therapists I've worked with in the past will ask when you're dealing with couples, like, how is your sex life? What is the frequency, the quality of your sex life been like? Has it been like this over a prolonged period of time? Sex may have become very infrequent. Now, this isn't to say like there's different elements of like mismatched sex drives, life stressors, post-pregnancy. There can be loads of different things at play. But in this context, for the sake of this conversation, we'll say that there's been a noticeable change, and it's got negative, it's got less fulfilling, it's got less frequent. There's no communication, it's not being prioritized. Might even feel like a chore or an obligation even when it does happen. Now, there's reasons why that can get to that place, and that's a whole other episode to talk about. But one of the things that can contribute to that is disconnection, is that resentment, is that frustration, is feeling alone with your feelings, maybe being caught in constant cycles of conflict, unresolved arguments. And like I mentioned there, life stressors is a major impact on a person's sex life, and especially, not saying especially for men, but when you look at relative sex drive and we look at the things that can impact male testosterone and the ability to perform, if stress is too high and that stress isn't being regulated or dealt with, it can lead to all sorts of performance issues. And then obviously we've got physiological factors to look at as well, but for the most part, if there's constant stress and tension within the relationship, it is very likely the sex life might also have been affected as well, because how willing or how much you really want to connect with somebody when you're feeling that disconnection, when you're feeling that distance between you, when you're feeling that there's them actively pushing away or pulling back from you, or maybe treating you in a way that doesn't warm you up to them. So other signs to look out for: recognizing and feeling like your needs, wants don't matter to your partner, that they ignore your requests for things to change. This is even when you're communicating that they're ignoring it, disregarding it. Feeling like you can't be vulnerable or authentic around them. So spoke to death about this before, about safety and about respect and about your partner holding a solid space. If you can't be vulnerable or authentic or be yourself, that's not a good space for you to be in. Or if you have to be somebody that you're not in order for this to function, that's not good. And again, I mentioned before, feeling like you need to carry the burden of the responsibility for the relationship without support from your partner. So I mentioned finances, chores, looking after children, different other responsibilities. The constant pattern of conflict The Gottman Institute have talked about this. You've got solvable problems and you've got perpetual problems. So perpetual problems are sometimes problems without solutions where we have to look more towards compromise where possible. Solvable problems are things that we can talk about and we can move through it. And, we might identify the pattern, but there's certain percentages of problems that will come up again and again and again. And it's about looking at the communication, looking at how we move through this, how we're behaving. But what they found is that in relationships with certain communication dynamics, and I spoke about, the four horsemen before, defensiveness, criticism, stonewalling, and contempt, that leads to a major disconnection. It leads to major, major problems in the relationship. Now, some of these are very normalized because of relational templates that you may or may not have grown up with, behavior that you might have seen modeled. But it massively affects the quality of the relationship, the experience of the relationship. And where these elements are at play, it's very likely that if that's not dealt with, the relationship will end at some point in time. In fact, it was seen as a predictor for marriages ending within the Gottman Institute. They had the data there to indicate that where the four horsemen were present, there was a high likelihood that marriage or relationship could be over within 5 years, or I think maybe a bit more. So very obvious signs: feeling like you need to walk on eggshells, avoid conflict at all costs in order to keep the peace, or for even for the relationship to function. That's not good as it stands. Feeling constantly blamed, or that cycle of communication where you're caught in the blame game, or what's also known as finding the bad guy, always trying to find the bad person, the person that's at fault. And remember, when you're constantly being blamed, that when I would teach this before, I would point the finger, because that was the way the satir method would have spoke about blame, point the finger, and it's like you've got all that distance between the two of you metaphorically, and then also when you're in blame, you're not looking at your part in the dance, you're not looking at your element of responsibility, how you contributed to this dance. And this is where couples counseling, this is where your own personal therapy and looking at your communication pattern, your relational template can help shift that. But anyway, where there's constant conflict and cycles of blame and dysfunctional communication and all those severe problems with the defensiveness, criticism, stonewalling, contempt, they're majorly problematic behaviors. Defensiveness, for a start, you're completely shutting the person out, you're invalidating where they're coming from, you're leaving them alone in their emotional experience, you're shifting responsibility, you're not actually acknowledging, what's going on. It's very disconnecting. Criticism, you're attacking the person's character, you're going after them personally. We all know how icky and disgusting it feels to be criticised, especially when it's somebody that you love. Stonewalling, massively punishing. Spoke about this before at length. It's like silent treatment. It just instills guilt, hurt, frustration, pain. It's just such a horrible experience to be stonewalled, especially when it goes on for prolonged periods of time, because it's a form of manipulation as well. It's guilting somebody into compliance, punishing somebody into compliance, and then contempt, seeing the absolute worst in somebody, treating them in such a demeaning and contemptuous and disrespectful and degrading way. And that could come up through belittling them, dragging up their past to humiliate or shame them, all these different behaviours that, if that's become the norm or in the relationship, that's not a good sign. It's a sign the relationship is moving in a bad direction. Your trust being broken steadily in the relationship is another thing to look out for. Trust is a major pillar within the relationship, and it comes back to that acronym I mentioned at the start, are you there for me? Can I rely on you? Can I relax into the relationship? Can I count on you when I need you? And if people break their promises and don't show up for you and don't follow through, and their word doesn't mean anything, not only are they out of integrity with themselves, but they're out of integrity with you. And it's very hard for you to have that sense of security and connection and safety in a relationship, because trust is a major element of that. And that also goes hand in hand with your boundaries being constantly violated and ignored. And within betrayals, betrayals look like different things to different people. Obviously, a lot of people think of cheating in affairs, but it can be, somebody talking shit about you, like your partner talking shit about you to your collective friend group, discussing your problems openly in a very demeaning or biased way, doing things to actively, sharing stuff without your permission, very personal, raw, vulnerable stuff that you might have shared with them, sharing that with a group of people without your permission. There's loads of ways betrayals can take place and actually severely impact the connection between the two of you. But on that topic about the person not being there for you, where this can massively rupture connection in a relationship, and I'll give you a very, very simple example. When somebody, for example, is maybe going through grief, where they're maybe losing a parent or they're losing somebody in their life that's dying, and they're overwhelmed and they're not able to regulate and they're not coping, And throughout that period of time, their partner is just not there for them. They're not present. They're not showing any interest. They're not in any way attuned to what's going on, or they've actively taken themselves out of that situation and left that person alone, and they're hurt and in their pain and in their suffering. Or maybe, you know, this can manifest in a lot of other different scenarios, but at the core of that, that person has had to be alone in that experience. And that rupture of trust, that rupture of loyalty, that rupture of, you know, being there to support them as a partner, as their person, can be very hard to come back from. And it's not even likely that that can happen, that they can repair that in therapy. I mean, there's a handful of experiences I think some people will go through in their life where you have to step up as a partner, and I think that's a big one. If you go through something really, really tumultuous or upsetting or fucking horrendous that you have to go through, and your partner actively chooses not to be there, and prioritizes something else, and that there can be reasons why, but we're not about that right now. That can majorly affect the quality of the relationship and the connection within the relationship. Another big one, coming back to conflict. No attempt to ever apologize or make a repair. That is a major indication that things aren't good in the relationship. You need to learn, people in general need to learn to apologize, and apologize in a way that is effective and resonates with the partner. You know, acknowledging the hurt that was caused, making amends, promising not to do it again, committing to changing the behaviour, giving them space to process their emotions, and not forcing forgiveness for the sake of ego. But also that the repairs, you know, are rebuilding trust, rebuilding safety, that they're showing respect for the person's emotions, that you're willing to attune to them, you're willing to actually work on things and show that willingness to actually be a more consistent partner for them. And when people choose not to apologize, or, you know, reject the notion of it at all, you know, it's very disrespectful, it's very hurtful. And, you know, there's reasons for that, people's conditioning around what they think apologizing means or what it looks like. And also, I suppose in a gendered way, some men are just totally against apologizing because they think it's beneath them, or they think it makes them weak, or they think it makes them X, Y, and Z. But the reality is, you know, you're going to go through your life, and it's not realistic to say that you're never going to apologize for anything in your life. Like, somebody's going to hold you accountable, somebody's going to check you, and as a man, it might be another man that checks you, it might be another man that puts you in your place and holds you accountable for the things that you've done. And I would imagine that most men have had to hold their hands up and apologize for things that they've done. So, you know, learn to get out of your own way, learn to move through your ego and acknowledge, right, if I want this relationship to be fulfilling, if I want all these things that I say that I want, I have to acknowledge my own personal responsibility for the hurt that I might be causing my partner, whether it's intentional or inadvertent. And apologising doesn't make me less of a person by doing that. You know, it's part about being a responsible, consistent partner as well. And the thing is, like, we expect it from our leaders, and we expect it from the people that we look up to in life. So why can we not embody that in the relationship when we have done something wrong? And this is different from chronically blaming somebody and chronically expecting them to take responsibility and say sorry when they've done nothing wrong. That's a very different dynamic, and that's more present in coercive and abusive relationships. But without going off on a tangent, again, apology language is massively underrated. Learning how to make repairs in the relationship, remembering how to foster that connection, the closeness, so that intimacy and stuff like that can be built on. I'll come to intimacy after this, but just on that. Another big thing, not having your own autonomy. So that's the other extreme about living parallel lives, but not being able to make your own choices out of fear of how they might react, not having your own independence. Not having any kind of space. So the other extreme of having spaces completely threatening to derail the relationship, so you have no sense of self, you feel like you're completely defined, or it's expected that you're completely defined by the relationship, you know, because you need space to be able to attend to your well-being. But there is that balance around time spent for yourself, time spent with your partner, and also allowing them the same space and freedom to attend to themselves, to, you know, foster their other interpersonal relationships with friends, family, you know, their career, different things that's going on. But it's that balance between not having that much space that, you know, you're totally disconnected, that you're living parallel, completely separate lives, and then the other extreme where it's overly enmeshed to the point where, you know, you don't feel like you have any space at all. And it goes without saying too that there shouldn't be any kind of continuous abusive behaviour. It should never be expected, that you should be tolerating that. That can be, if abusive behaviour is in the relationship's chilled. You know, you even taking yourself into therapy thinking that you're going to correct your behaviour if you're the partner on the receiving end of the abuse. Like, there's only so much that's possible. You can't heal or make changes in an abusive environment, especially when somebody is not recognizing the impact or doesn't care about the impact of their abusive behavior towards you. And just to finish on these signs as well, you don't trust them. You don't trust that they're loyal to you. They've stopped talking about a shared future together. They don't make plans with you and them for the long term. You don't feel like you're on the same page in terms of what you want for the future. There mightn't even be any future-based talking at all. There might be no degree of commitment, no discussion around the long-term trajectory of where things are going. And again, like that's a hard reality to sit with. And I know I've given you a lot of thinking points that are on this, but the problem is people can see that these things are there. People can see that the relationship has shifted. People can see that it's not what it was. And I think, like I've spoken about this before, the highlight reel and the nostalgia trap, that when things are shit, some of the things that people will do to sustain their effort to stay in the relationship is to go back to the good times, go back and think about the early stages of the relationship. But one of the key things that you have to remember about this as well is you're reflecting on the things that they were doing at that point in time that were good. You know, when was the last time that you were actually experiencing this and feeling this and where that effort was made? And, you know, how much has the things substantially changed since then? You know, you can't, that's not going to sustain you going forward, especially in a long-term relationship. There has to be intention. There has to be effort made. You have to choose to work on certain things. And some people are like, oh, well, you know, if relationships, a good, healthy, fulfilling, not perfect, but really great relationship, I shouldn't have to do X, Y, and Z, and it should just flow and it should just be easy. And, you know, we shouldn't have to talk about sex. It should just happen. We shouldn't have to talk about intimacy. I shouldn't have to tell them, you know, we need to plan dates. I shouldn't have to tell them to do X, Y, and Z. And I get that. I get that a lot of people might think that. But again, in a long-term relationship, you have to be intentional. You have to look at what you can control. You can look at your part in that dance. You know, and it's not to say these are immediately going to go to couples therapy and start unpacking stuff and looking at stuff. And obviously context is important. But when I educate myself on what makes a good relationship, I can hold myself accountable to what am I doing? How am I showing up? How well do I attune to my partner? How well am I making this person feel connected to me? Am I making them feel valued, loved, appreciated, respected? Do I make them feel like a priority? Do I show them that the relationship matters to me? Do I do these small things often to build positive regard with my partner? Do I feel positive about her? Do I feel grateful to have this person in my life? Those are things that I can control. But what will chin any relationship if it's in a bad place is just burying your head in the sand, thinking everything's grand, then deluding yourself and being in that place of denial when you know that it's not good, when you know that there's things that are drastic that need to change. You know, that's a form of self-deception. And it's like, and I've said this to death too, if nothing changes, nothing's going to change. You know, you're sitting there holding all these feelings and hoping for things to be different. And the thing is, you might find yourself in a loveless, sexless marriage or relationship, unfulfilled, unhappy, settling for whatever reason. And, you know, a bit of action and a bit of intention and a bit of the right communication and skills and willingness of both people to work on things can transform this. And again, when we look at the contributors as to what could be causing the separation or causing things to drift apart or feel different, communication is at the core of it. You know, some people won't talk to their partner about anything because it leads to an escalation. Maybe the defensiveness and criticism and contempt is so bad that they don't want to talk about certain things, or they get shut down or shut out. And that's a slightly different dynamic, but it's also an indicator that things aren't good in the relationship. And either way, if the person was open to this and you did bring it up, even if you were afraid of how they might handle it, there's scope then there for growth if they can get out of their own way and they can choose to work on things with you, you know, have that willingness to sit down and share each other's experience and share what's coming up for each other and actually change things. And again, you having to self-betray or settle for something that you know is not right and your heart's not good for you because you're out of integrity with yourself, you're out of alignment with yourself, you're not being fully honest and true and real with yourself, and that's holding you back in your life, because you'll not be free to do the things that you really need to do to have the kind of relationship and quality of life that you want. And you might actually be finding that you're toning yourself down or changing who you are and settling for things that you ordinarily wouldn't settle for because you're just trying to make this relationship function. And it might be costing you so much that you're not even aware of. And I think that's something that people really need to recognise. If you believe that this is the only life that you're ever going to have, the quality of your relationship is significantly going to determine the quality of your life. And that's the truth. Like, you look at any personal development book, you look at any coaching book, you look at anything to do with therapy, the sum quality of your relationships will determine the quality of your life in many ways. And if you're settling for something that's not adding to your quality of life, it's making you deeply unhappy, deeply unfulfilled, and you're not willing to do anything about it at all, out of fear, lack of self-esteem, lack of confidence, lack of self-worth, or any other reason, then it's a horrible place to be. But I'm hoping people are listening to this, or it's going to jog them into some sort of action. It's going to make them lean into some sort of conversation, or even just they pause and reflect and see what's coming up for you. That's massive in and of itself. You shouldn't have to lie to yourself about the nature of a relationship, or lie to yourself about what it's been like for you. And sometimes we do this because we're afraid of change. We're afraid of, the unknown, or the uncertainty that can come with, well, what if I do try to do this and it doesn't work out? Or what if I do this, or I decide to leave, or I make a big change and it doesn't work out? The opposite's also true. It's plausible. What if it does? What if this person meets you halfway? What if they choose to work in a relationship and it gets amazing? Or what if that relationship wasn't right for you in the first place, and by taking action, you take yourself out of it? Or maybe you come into a space and you talk about what's been going on. You realise, fuck, this has been really abusive. I didn't realise it was as bad as what it was, or that it was affecting me and making me feel this way for so long. And then again, even within that space, if your partner shares with you, maybe there's stuff they've held back on saying for most of the time because embarrassment, shame, guilt. There could be unresolved trauma, there could be addiction, there could be physiological stuff that's going on, especially when we talk about intimacy and not being able to perform and not being able to connect. There could be major things that are going on for them that they haven't communicated, and vice versa. When we talk about psychosexual issues, often a partner might be like, well, what is it about me? Why does this person not want to have sex with me? Why do they not want to be close or initiate, or whatever it is? But because we're not communicating, we're not sharing our experience, we're not using our voice in that way, we might never get to the core of what it is and fall into that assumption trap. Whew, you take a big breath. So just on that, I believe closeness and connection can be intentionally built upon. I think it can be focused, and it can be developed if people choose to put the effort in and the work in and learn to understand each other. And it does take commitment and a willingness from both people. And there are practices and actions that are proven to bring people together. Like, it's not all doom and gloom when it comes to relationships. People can have amazing, fulfilling relationships, and that closeness and growth, it doesn't have to fade. I genuinely don't believe it has to fade, because some of the most successful, happy people you'll meet in your life have been in long-term relationships, long-term marriages, and they continue to grow and they continue to thrive and they continue to feel close. And that doesn't mean that, the intimacy has to fade, or, there's certain practices that can help that for the long term. And I don't think you should settle for less. I don't think that means that it's not going to require communication, that it's not going to require effort, that it's not going to require a bit of a focused intention on how you're showing up and working through things. But I do think that things can be massively and drastically improved on when both people choose to prioritise the quality of the relationship for each other, clear the fluff and the shit that's between the two of you that's not being spoken about, and have more effective ways of connecting, communicating, repairing, prioritising the closeness and the understanding between the two of you. And look, a really good relationship, a really healthy, fulfilling relationship will have certain needs to be met. You need to feel needed. You need to feel wanted. You need to feel seen and understood. And massively, you need to feel appreciated. That is so important. They know that the person is going to be there for you when you need them. They know that you can be safe and vulnerable with them, that you can share even the most rawest parts of yourself with them, and know that they're going to be non-judgmental, they're going to be respectful, they're going to hold that space for you, that they can be there for you, that they can be safe and understanding and show empathy and curiosity towards you when you're in that place. And that there's a foundation of trust and loyalty and fidelity and respect between the two of you. Do you know that you trust them as much as they trust you, and that commitment to each other is clear? And I think that's so fucking important, that commitment is in no way, shape or form ambiguous. You know they're in this with you, and that they're as invested in the future together as you are. Do you know that you don't need to be perfect, and that if you're getting it right most of the time, and that you're choosing to show up as your best, most authentic self and do as much as you can and work through things when they go tits up, that's enough, and that you at your core are enough as who you are, and that you're not too much. And I think some people have this as well, I'm just too much, and if I was more this or if I was less this. Look, at the core of who you are, when you show the realest, truest aspect, the self, the most congruent version of you, that there's acceptance of that from your partner. Now, that's not to say like all the fucking negative stuff that needs to be worked on just gets swept under the carpet, but they see the whole person, not the potential of who you could be, the whole person, and that's enough, that they love you for that. Not who you need to be or what you need to embody or do for them in order to be worthy of love, but that you're loved for who you are at your core. That there's a willingness between us both to be open, honest, and transparent, and to be willing to work through things together, not just to shut down, shut out, sweep it under the carpet, ignore it, deny it, and move forward, but that we'll get on and we'll muck on together and we'll work through things, and we'll have that intention for the relationship. And I just want to finish, like, even just something very, very light, very, very actionable that you can do immediately from this. Establish rituals of connection. Just something small that you can take away from this right now, that you can even do that can improve your relationship just gradually already. Rituals of connection. Greeting each other every day. When you wake up, maybe even kissing the person, telling them that you love them. When you come home from work or when you leave to go out and do X, Y, and Z, that you acknowledge each other. When you leave, you acknowledge each other when you come home. You make an effort to show affection, say that you love them, kiss them, cuddle them, whatever it is. Making weekly plans and dates, even if it's just a wee small thing, making it a priority so that it's not overlooked, doing something that will help you connect to them. So it could be something simple, like I know my partner loves the cinema. It could be going to the cinema, it could be going for a coffee date, it could be going to somewhere that they like for breakfast. It could just be something small, but small things add up, and it's the small things that really do help define the relationship over time and the connection, because it's showing them that you're thinking about them and that they matter to you and that you want to help them feel a certain way. Complimenting each other sincerely and meaning it. Underrated. I think that's something that we can do immediately. Surprising one another. So this is where love languages come in. How do they feel most connected? Can you do anything around that? Another one that you can implement straight away. Appreciation. Showing them that you appreciate them. Thank them for the things that you're doing. Communicate that gratitude and affection towards them. And that'll go a long way in the very early stages of building that connection again. And this is something that I've been working on a lot this last while, and I'm going to be launching a program for couples very, very soon. So stay posted on that. Keep an eye on my social media. You can join my newsletter through the link in my bio and also my website, and I'll be, communicating when this is going live. But this is an in-depth program that I'm very, very excited to be launching, and it's going to be focusing on connection, building intimacy, fostering that closeness in a relationship. So whether you're in a short-term relationship or a long-term relationship, this will be transformative. I am putting so much into this, and I want it to be like a go-to for people as well, that they can keep coming back to, and they can keep replenishing and renewing and going through it and growing through the process. And if you go into this with your partner, you're both going to take so much away from this, that I can guarantee. I feel like even creating this and moving through it has helped me be more intentional on how I'm showing up in relationships. Or not showing up in relationships, showing up in my relationship. And just, it's highlighted so much to me in that regard. And I'm excited to share it with people. I'm excited to actually lead it. I wanted to do this live as well, so we can have that community interaction, and give people's experiences, and obviously build on it and make it more refined as we go forward. So I just want to say thanks so much for listening. If you have any thoughts on this at all, please send me a DM, connect with me on social media. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok. Let me know your thoughts, let me know your experiences. If you've been in a scenario where you've noticed the spark fade, if you've been in a situation where you felt somebody pulling back, or, how did you cope when you could see that things were moving towards separation? Share this with me, give me a shout, message me. It'll be brilliant to connect. And I just want to say thanks so much for listening to the podcast.